We've got Paul Hartzell, who is a founder of Trudos, one of the four founders, and is the manager of the Perfect Pitch LLC, which focuses on using effective sales techniques to grow software as a service for companies. He's taught these techniques to Fortune 500 companies in EMEA, US, and Asia. He's also a board member of Game Plan, a comprehensive student-athlete development software program used by more than 80,000 college athletes in the US, along with professional athletes from the NHL, NBA, NHL, and MLB. He is a graduate of Lehigh University with a degree in mechanical engineering, and he became the Lehigh Penske's Athletic Hall of Fame in 1998 in recognition of his baseball career at Lehigh and in Major League Baseball from 1976 to 1984. He ranks 8th in the California Angels of Anaheim history with an ERA of 3.27 over 512 innings and 132 games. So, it's always wonderful to hear about student athletes, and it's even more interesting to hear about athletes who, go through challenging programs like mechanical engineering and then go on to a career in the professional league. So with that, let me ask Paul to join the presentation, and welcome. And thank you very much, Paul, for agreeing to speak with us. So we look forward to hearing you talk today.
Well, thanks very much, Professor. This is, indeed an honor. I didn't, if I would have known you were going to read that whole thing, I'd have cut it down a little bit. But thank you. I'll share out my screen here, and we'll get this going. I think we have some interesting information for the group today, the students as well as the professionals that are involved. It's really important to me to emphasize and explain a little bit about my co-host today. Just about exactly 50 years ago, both Keith Spero and I were freshmen at Lehigh University. And we wound up joining the same fraternity. We wound up living literally a couple of doors away for the last 3 years. And then because, people have different lives and they go in different directions, you kind of lose touch. You get on one side of the country, or when I was in Singapore for 3 years, one side of the world, and you don't get as much contact with people. But this opportunity presented itself that Keith, who just has a world of experience with companies, as you can see from his bio, like Colgate Palmolive, the Clorox Company, Office Max, these were big, really important positions that all came from Keith's industrial engineering experience and degree from Lehigh. And he's gone on to do a lot of, really wonderful things. And today is in that position, as you can see, as an adjunct professor for 2 colleges in New Jersey. And so I'm just thrilled from a personal perspective to have Keith with me today. And, we hope to have a lot of fun. I do drag a few baseball terms into things from time to time. And today's lineup, I tried mightily to just have this limited to 10, which would be the 9 position players and the designated hitter. But unfortunately, it came over to 11. So we just have to sort of pretend that we have 1 extra player here today. But what we'll take you through are these categories, with particular attention to be paid with, again, a lot of Keith's experiences, and along with the 3 Ps, which we'll spend some time on in 2 locations, population, participation, and productivity. With the opportunity to hear Keith's voice for the first time, Keith, would you like to go ahead with the beginning of our presentation?
Hey, Paul, thanks very much. And for the folks, yeah, Paul and I met in 1971 when we were applying to Theta Delta Chi to be fraternity members. And it just speaks to the collegial nature of the fraternity network, as well as Lehigh University. Is, 50 years later, we can come together and, just speak to each other like we been dealing with each other on a day-to-day basis. So Paul, thank you very much for that introduction. And I understand industrial engineering now has a subset called supply chain management within the Lehigh University curriculum. So it's interesting how this whole thing has evolved. Certainly, really to speak about a little bit about what Jon spoke about broken chains in a network supply. Certainly the COVID-19 pandemic has put a light on the importance of supply chain management. And we went through a good 40 to 50 year period where supply chains were developed in such a way that they were focused on being very efficient in terms of how things worked. Cost reduction was very much at the forefront as supply chains evolved from being domestic to becoming international. But the COVID-19 pandemic really pointed out to the fact that how complex supply chains are. It's a number of very, very simple functions that must be connected. And if one or two of those functions are disconnected, it's very difficult to put them back together again. And I think businesses realize from 20 months ago, maybe going on more than 20 months ago since the pandemic hit, it's not like turning on and off a light switch. It's very complex. And people, all of a sudden, the business news, all of a sudden, supply chain management is at the forefront. Current events and daily news broadcasts and the electronic, print, and social media conduits highlight the global and national issues that we're faced with supply chain management. This information points to the fragile nature of supply chains that have been disrupted as COVID-19 has been paramount, and it's become very difficult to reconnect them. So we're faced with this issue of how to reconnect them, but at the same time too, it points to an opportunity. Do we reconnect them the same way that they were before they became unconnected? Is now the opportunity to look back and say, maybe there's a better way, just rather than putting them back the same way they were before the pandemic. So Paul, thanks.
Well, as we move down the lineup, what's the status of the United States and the global supply chain today? And I think there's a number of things, again, that Jon highlighted that really have become paramount in all of our considerations. Certainly labor and raw materials are two of them, and we're going to expand on that as the presentation goes along. Probably the second thing is, and again, we saw the numbers for Land O'Lakes at 100% turnover in the first year, but this employee turnover issue is extremely acute when it gets to technical systems that require organizational stability. This is just a very, very fundamental challenge today. So resource scarcity, labor, material, services, coupled with growing demand is causing tension in the supply chain. And it's increased competition for the same resources. And that's resulted in a supply shortage and increased prices to secure those same resources. The need to secure reliable supply has superseded the desire to reduce costs. So as we move on, and you'll notice that, as I said to Keith when we first started putting this together, I said, I like visual things. This is a fellow behind the frozen food area at the local Whole Foods who's holding up the sign that says, "Don't panic." So as a result of these supply chain disruptions, demand is exceeding supply for goods and services. And shortages for consumption items, grocery store items. I checked yesterday on an order that I placed with Costco, of all things, roughly 3 weeks ago, and it has not yet been delivered, and there is no firm date as to when it will deliver. And increased gas prices, we've seen that elevate more than $1 a gallon in the last 12 to 16 months. And long lead times, which is, of course, you know, sort of what I'm dealing with personal consumption for durable goods, appliances, phones, etc., have become the daily norm for consumers to navigate. Keith?
So we've taken 40 to 50 years to get ourselves into a situation where it gives us an opportunity to rethink how supply chains need to function as we go forward into this new century and the centuries beyond. Consumers understand how the shortages are impacting consumer product supply today. I'm married 41 years to a wonderful woman. She's seen me, you know, develop businesses, operate supply chains, et cetera, but she never quite understood what the heck supply chain meant. You know, as much as I could explain it, she never could understand it. But now she does. When she goes to the grocery stores and sees what more she's paying for staple items or items that she's looking for are not there, she'll come back to complain to me about what's the matter with the supply chain. So all of a sudden, supply chain has come to the forefront in terms of at least the American consciousness. Businesses have focuses for a long time to develop the most efficient supply chains that included low unit cost, shedding factories, treating people as expenses and risk. You know, it's not uncommon for businesses over the last 30 to 40 years to shed employees, outsource services, treat employees as risk, as opposed to an investment and an asset. This lack of development has caused somewhat of a challenge to implement and adopt technology into businesses today, which is really a critical element. That talent question that I asked Jon before is very much at the forefront of my experience in terms of how do businesses adopt the right technology that's going to move them forward, but and have the right talent on hand to be able to execute it accordingly. The floor technology from the 70s and 80s the technology skills from the 70s and 80s have been depleted. The popular expression today, digitization, was really commercialized in the 1970s. It was at the shop floor, the manufacturing shop floor. It was the transition from mechanical relay logic to programmable controllers. That was really the start of digitization in terms of the manufacturing environment. You know, it's that word term is as popular today in 2021 as the term internet was popular 20 years ago. But digitization has been in a manufacturing environment over the last 50 plus years. The problem is the skills associated with this evolution was downsized as manufacturing was shifted elsewhere. So the opportunities to practice the skills were moved offshore. The baby boomers, who Paul and I sit in, and by the way, it was Paul's birthday a couple of days ago, the baby boomers who learned these skills have retired and not been replaced in kind. So your car mechanic used to carry a screwdriver around with him. Now he carries around a computer. So there's a big talent gap between the technology and the talent available to execute. Paul?
We're sticking with you, Keith, on developing and mentoring.
So developing and mentoring human skills is hard. Anybody who says that, they've been a mentor to somebody realizes how difficult and time consuming it is to do that. And in today's day and age where people's day-to-day job has become more and more all-consuming, taking a mentoring approach has been a very difficult thing to do. It means going beyond the daily tasks to build organizational strength to meet future challenges. Academics, schools all themselves do not provide all the skills necessary that business requires. At the same time, too, businesses have not necessarily implemented good training and mentoring processes to develop those same skills that are needed. Therefore, there's a gap. Employees have been viewed as an expense to be eliminated as opposed to a resource to be developed. Developing talent needs to be a core competency for companies today. And why is that? To really get the full benefit of digitization, you need the skill set and the talent available to do that. Yon made a comment that I somewhat disagree with, where he said that technology will sometime in the future sustain itself. I'm hoping I'm quoting him correctly. I never think that will be the case, because as soon as there becomes one constraint in terms of what technology can do, there'll be another constraint that we don't know today that will need to be developed, and that will take a whole additional talent skill set to be able to implement that technology. So I just see technology as an ever-evolving set of circumstances and opportunities that need to be implemented. Businesses need to value the benefit of R&D, not just as an expense to be avoided. Somewhere along the line, there was a separation between research and development, product development, and manufacturing. Manufacturing is the real-life laboratory for invention. It is the dirty part of supply chain, but it's a necessary nitty-gritty part of supply chain that provides the goods and services. And a big watch out today from Paul and my perspective is the focus of ESG. ESG is environmental, society, and governance. These are common factors in any company that promotes its brand. You want any brand name company wants to be considered to be a good citizen, a quote unquote good citizen. ESG, in our viewpoint, is just another acronym for being a good citizen, and any branded company certainly wants to be a good citizen. The watch out is it needs to not get in front of the business mission, but be a component of that business mission. Paul?
Well, we're still laboring through what is supply chain management. And what we really believe is supply chain management's the transformation of supply chain services. And the accurate and truthful transformation of information to cash via technologies such as blockchain, often referred to as distributed ledger, allows companies to unearth data which is not being utilized and making it a trusted and immutable source. Supply chain management capability in building and growing the height of a three-legged stool that supports business growth. And the concept of a three-legged stool, if we leave especially the students with a message today, there's an awful lot of things you can explain with a three-legged stool. In this case, information, technology and material, and services and organizational development. And the reason that you use the analogy of the three-legged stool is if you pull one of those legs off, you got a problem. All three of these need to be in sync to reach full business values. Probably, again, I'm I like pictures. I seem to remember pictures better than I do words, and that goes back to my probably Lehigh days. But every one of these supply chains that we have investigated and analyzed and looked way back into the supply chain. And when I say that, I mean to the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers that normally today, you just don't have much visibility in them. But all of these small activities become a part of a very complex network. And there's no single function in the supply chain that is by itself complex. The elegance in supply chain comes from fluidity and seamless integration of the individual functions into a complex network. And Professor Zachariah and I have exchanged emails and also a bit of a discussion, but a really nice company that's located in Harriman, Utah, called Bullfrog. They make spas. And every time I look at this diagram, I think of the Wall Street Journal article about Bullfrog and how their top of the line product, the parts travel to make one Bullfrog spa, travel over 850,000 miles to reach Harriman, Utah for final assembly. So if this diagram, kind of registers with anyone, just think about it in the terms of Bullfrog Spas, Harriman, Utah, and over 850,000 miles of travel. Keith?
What are the critical factors to accelerating capability and supply chain to support economic growth? Well, first and foremost, there needs to be very clear alignment between the supply chain network and capability with the business mission. The business mission needs to know, who are you? Are you the price leader? Are you the new product development leader? Are you the innovation company? So by knowing who you are as a business, your supply chain needs to be aligned with you as an organization so you can execute effectively. These issues are not new. They've evolved over the last 40 to 50 years. As a result of the COVID disruption, it's become very difficult to overcome where we currently are, because those linkages have been broken, and where there may not have been good clarity in terms of a business mission, the COVID-19 issue has just exacerbated that situation due to maybe a lack of alignment in terms of the supply chain network and capability with the business mission. The development and crystallization of an executable plan that aligns the business mission with the supply chain execution capability as the forefront to sustainable success. Yon uses the word agile, I'll use the word capable. A supply chain must be capable to adapt to the changing needs of the business, and it must be nimble and capable enough to adapt itself accordingly. This requires effective leadership. Nothing can be done without effective leadership at the top of the supply chain network pyramid. Leadership is nothing new. Leadership has worked for 2,000 years and will continue to work going forward. An organization without effective leadership that can convey a clear message, get things done, and inspire others to do as needed is at the forefront of any organization today. The last piece is that the organization needs to make sure that the cultural norms of the organization are consistent throughout the current organization and other organizations that may be being looked at from a merger and acquisition standpoint. I did my master's thesis probably 30 years ago on the difficulty of mergers and acquisitions was not on the finance side, not on the product side, not on the innovative side, not on the technology side, but on the cultural side. And we define culture as the sum of the habits of the organization. It's the way people do work. And there needs to be attention to that detail. Paul?
Key macroeconomic factors impacting supply chain. You know, I think there's a number of important messages here for the students participating. I think this is really one of the most important. If you can remember the 3 Ps, and we'll come back to them in a little bit. Keith will have a couple of comments, but you know, when you think about the overall economic growth, these 3 Ps are really the physics. So we got a 4th P of economic growth. Any company needs population growth to expand both demand from a consumption perspective and resources to provide commensurate supply. So here we are in a situation where 70% of the U.S. GDP is dependent upon consumer spending, and we need to have the right amount of correctly skilled people to make this happen. But we're in a situation that is, you know, an interesting intersection of the declining U.S. birth rate, immigration policies, and you know, this is going to need to have some level of resolution or clarity to get this thing moving. There must be a significant percentage of the population involved in employment contribution to ensure supply. It's just critical. So the participation in the workplace is, you know, you can see there's a decline here, 67% to 61% today. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but we need to address those reasons and make the employment opportunities more attractive. And the resources that we do have, and Yone mentioned this, I think, a number of times in a number of different ways, that these participating resources need to be engaged in an efficient manner to make sure that the population's quality of life is improved. It's just critical. So, of course, productivity becomes the core around this, improving quality of life and cultural issues, and sort of smoothing out social inequities. So what we, you know, really determine here at the end of the 3 Ps is value is going to grow as utility surpasses expenses. Moving to the next slide, what's causing these current inflationary pressures on the economy? You know, this is directly impacting everyone at the conference. We don't have a demand problem. We have a supply problem. Wages must rise. In the United States, employee wages are growing, but the cost of goods is growing faster. We all know this. Every day we know this. In the 3rd quarter, GDP grew just a little over 2%, while the consumer price index grew at over 5.5%. Speaking to the ominous fear of the economy being overcome by stagflation, which is price exceeding economic growth. Another, you know, again, I like my graphics. What's currently causing inflationary pressures on the economy? Well, groceries, gasoline, the economic impact of inflation. Retail stores are having issues keeping the store shelves full, which is negatively impacting, of course, sales issues and price increases. Durable goods have mitigated sales to some extent, such as appliances and automobiles. And of course, there's an increased cost to supply goods. Just fill up your car with gas to appreciate the issue. When Keith and I were students at Lehigh, the there was just nothing like getting up early on a Saturday morning to go get your car in the queue at the local gas station, so you could get a certain number of gallons of gas. And I recall doing that a couple of times to visit other Lehigh classmates, and wondering if I was going to get enough gas to get back to the campus. So these things have a way of repeating themselves. Keith?
The talent gap in terms of having the right skills available for a company to adopt the right technology is a critical issue that needs to be evolved. Such was my question to Jon in terms of how is his company addressing that, and I think he answered that. It's a difficult process, and this is in order for companies to become more productive. Technology needs to be at the forefront. How do I do more work with less input? But the skills gap and the talent gap is a major issue today, of which universities play a role as well as businesses play a role. When Paul and I graduated in 1975, a college diploma was a lottery ticket to a lifetime long-term career. The expectations of businesses have grown to expect its new hires to have instant impact on the business function. This, combined with businesses not investing in employee development, cause conflict to develop in terms of employee readiness. This speaks to the importance of enhancing the academic/business relationship. The balance of power between the employer and employee have been shifted due to the 3 Ps that Paul mentioned before. Just a up-to-date fact is that the productivity numbers for the 3rd quarter just came out this past week for the United States. It was reported as a decline, a negative 3%. At the same time, too, wages have increased by 4.8%. This is a recipe for an inflationary spiral, which needs to be addressed, obviously. For the first time in about the last 40 years, the employee holds the advantage. Around 1980, which was about the time Paul and I were starting our professional careers, businesses broke the employee-employer bond, loyalty bond, which grew from post-World War II by beginning the outsourcing and the reduction in force process. Paul and I remember it now. Paul and I remember it now that the Sands Casino used to be Bethlehem Steel. That just be an image in terms of what's happened over the last 40 to 50 years. So the tables have turned, and this creates an opportunity for business today to address it. Paul?
I'm at the 2-minute mark left to go, so we're going to fly. We really must think about introducing information technology to drive higher utilization of this data that is hidden. And I say that it's hidden because the supply chains, if you remember that other graphic, have become so complicated with both onshore and offshore components that a lot of this data, it's very, very difficult to have any kind of visualization of it. And, unfortunately, just like baseball statistics, today's environment, both businesses and individuals are overwhelmed with data. I watch games today, I have to take naps in the middle of them. There's so much data. But that might be all consuming, and sometimes it's actually even inaccurate. So businesses need to develop strong, executable information technology filters for all types of communication conduits. In other words, business to business, business to individual, machine to business, et cetera, for management to make timely and effective decisions. This is going to be very critical going forward. Keith?
we need to take, in order to attain sustainability, and just to piggyback on what Yon shared, is we need to take supply chain management, supply chain executives need to take the long-term view. We're faced again with, just to be redundant on the talent gap, to execute technology accordingly. Reshoring efforts from a manufacturing standpoint have been stifled over the last 10 to 15 years based upon the talent gap. The money is there, the inclination is there, but the talent gap will be a major issue that needs to be overcome. And both the academic world as well as the business world, from a mentoring standpoint, can help to address that. Paul, next slide. We need to think beyond myopic tactics to an executable solution. The solution does not involve tactics alone, but a strategy, and an executable strategy that is systemic and sustainable, considering the business mission, technology, talent pool, government regulation, taxes, etc. First and foremost, it requires enlightened leadership to execute it. As we said at the outset, COVID-19 is not the reason for supply chains to have been constructed over the last 40 years, but it has exposed the network, its fragility, that has initiated a study of those factors today, which we're talking about. The supply chain issues being faced today are not a function of what we're eating today, but it's a function of what we've eaten.
The impact of COVID-19 on the global supply chain has put a big light on its importance to countries, businesses, and consumers. The opportunity at hand is to rethink its construction and not go back to normal just because the COVID-19 virus becomes minimized at some point in the hopefully near future. To quote someone who even precedes Keith and I in the academic world, Albert Einstein, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting different results.
Paul and I will close by saying is we couldn't have said it any better than what appeared on a page article in the Wall Street Journal this past week. We need to look at the current situation as an opportunity to renew, not just an issue to just recouple everything just the way it was before the pandemic, but it offers us an opportunity to do it differently and better and learn from what we've done over the last 40, 50 years. So Paul and I thank you, and we're ready to entertain your questions.